Welcome, everyone. Just going to give this a couple of minutes for folks to join in before we begin. Really, really grateful to have all of you here. For some of you, it's the morning. For some of you, it's late at night. We're just really, really glad to have all of you here with us. It's a good time to make a start. Fantastic. Welcome, everyone, to the third in this webinar series, Voices from Palestine, Building Feminist Solidarity. Please note that you can access captions and a transcript using the toggle features at the bottom of your screen. My name is Kirti, and I will be moderating this session with my colleague, Natalie Brooke, as part of We Are Feminist Leaders. For those of you who don't know us, we're a small initiative supporting individuals and organizations to embed feminist principles into their work. First of all, thank you so much for registering for this session and for being part of this conversation. As I said, this is our third session together. We had Etaf Rum from the Women's Center for Legal Aid and Counseling, Palestine, and Dr. Nahid Habiballah joined us previously. And for those of you who missed our first two sessions, you can access the resources on our website, which report out on the conversations we had. In a couple of seconds, you'll find a link to the resource page on our website, and we'd love for you to return to it from time to time for updates on all our sessions in this series. Today marks 6 months since the ongoing genocide began, bringing the duration of this colonial violence to 75 years and 6 months and counting. We're also seeing that news from Gaza is unfortunately being pushed down in our news feeds, with social media settings auto-attuned to excluding these important voices. This drove home the importance of bringing more voices of women from Palestine to the forefront through these conversations. We're aware that many of you may be experiencing heaviness, grief, and a whole lot of other emotions from the ongoing situation in Palestine and its devastating impacts. We want to let you know that we're here to support each other through these difficult times. In the words of political activist and author Saira Rao, we are all we have. We are all we have ever had. Step into community. In our ongoing attempt at continuing to surface glimmers of hope, we also want to share recent news that the Oglala Sioux tribe, one of the 7 sub-tribes of the Lakota people living on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation in South Dakota, the 8th largest Native American reservation in the United States, passed a resolution in support of Palestinians with the statement, just as Palestinians showed up for us at the UN, Wounded Knee, and Standing Rock, they will show up for us again when we call on them. This is the essence of being a good relative in warrior society. We must show up for them. As we proceed together in this session, please know that whatever you're feeling, your full, rich emotions are welcome here in our community, because we know that this work is not the work of a few months, a year, or even a few years. This is long-term work, and we want to sustain ourselves and each other for the journey ahead. So what can you expect today in our session? We have a brilliant speaker here for you today who will introduce you to shortly. We will hear a reading from her, have a conversation about her work, and then there'll be time for all of you to ask questions and answers and discuss opportunities for action. Please use the Q&A function to ask your questions and keep them coming through the conversation that we will be having. You can use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen in the toolbar, and feel free to leave your questions anonymously or with your name included. This is a space based on respect, so we will not tolerate any abuse or discriminatory behavior. Any participants engaging in this way will be asked to leave. As part of this session, you will also have the opportunity to make a donation to the UN Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees, or UNRWA, a cause that our speaker has chosen. We know economically this is a difficult time for many people, but if you're able to donate, please do so using the link that will come up on chat now. We want to acknowledge that this conversation may be a challenging one to be part of and may include references to different types of gender-based violence. Please be aware of that and do what you need to do to feel supported. So if that means stepping away, that's totally fine. We're aware that people are joining these calls from different contexts, and for some of you, these may also be sites of surveillance. Please don't hesitate to rename yourself or use an anonymous or a pseudonymous tag if that feels right for you. We recognize that our speaker has taken a leap of faith to be present and vulnerable, so we invite you to acknowledge and respect the emotional labor it takes to have these conversations. I'll pause now and invite my colleague Natalie to introduce our speaker for today.
Thanks so much, Kirti, and a really warm welcome from me as well. It's my huge pleasure to be able to introduce our speaker today. We're absolutely delighted to be joined by Etaf Rum. Etaf is a Palestinian-American New York Times bestselling author. She was born and raised in Brooklyn, New York, by Palestinian immigrants. And as well as being a novelist, Etaf teaches university English literature. So her debut novel, A Woman is Man, was published in 2019, and her latest novel is Evil Eye, which is awarded literary acclaim and was recognised as an NPR Best Book of the Year. So before we start, and I give Etaf an opportunity to say anything further about herself as well, we'd love to know from you if you're familiar with Etaf's work, and there's no expectation that you are. It just helps us get a sense of whether or not you have read her work, for example. So I'm just going to launch a poll here. Excuse my momentary technical pause. So hopefully you'll see a poll that just asks you, how familiar are you with Etaf's work? And the options we have here are that you've read one of her books, you've heard of her work, or Etaf's work is new to you. So if you could just take a moment to respond to that poll, we would be really grateful. I'll just give you a minute because I can see more responses still coming in. And I see a couple of comments in the chat box as well. Yes, some of you naming what you've read. Okay, so Etaf, just so you know, from the responses I can see here, have 27% of people have read one of your books, 18% have heard of your work, and about 55% your work is new to them.
Nice. Thank you so much for having me. I see so many familiar faces or names in the chat box, and I wanted to just thank everyone who's decided to come and join this conversation, taking time out of their day. I love you all, and I'm really honored to be part of this space.
Thank you so much. So Etaf, I shared a little bit about you. If there's anything else you want to share about yourself, please do. And you've also really generously agreed to read us an excerpt from some of your work. So I'm going to hand over to you to do that, if that's okay.
Yes, I will read the first page of Evil Eye. To give a little bit of context, Evil Eye is a book about a Palestinian-American woman who has really achieved everything that she has set out to achieve in this capitalistic consumerist society. She has gone far beyond the life that her mother and her grandmother had. Her grandmother witnessed the Nakba, and so Yara has very distinct stories about the Nakba from her ancestors, and she really has been impacted by this displacement and by this loss of identity. So this novel is about a woman who has thought that she has escaped the confines of her past and her trauma, her family trauma, Palestinian trauma in America. She thought that she has found freedom and has found independence, only to find out that she has really pushed down those traumatic memories of herself and her family, and she now has to face these memories. This novel is written with two elements. It's written throughout journal entries and also in a third person narrative. And I chose to start the novel with her journal entry. It's not until we get into later in the novel that we see her actually begin journaling, and then these narratives kind of come together. So I'll start. This is Yada's journal. I don't know why I'm writing this. William said it would help me articulate myself to you, reconcile past and present. I need to go back there. Need to find a way to reach you. But I don't know how. I've never been good with words. There are some things language cannot communicate. Instead, I paint pictures in my mind. I build a white house with a colorful garden and a quiet lake covered in emerald green lily pads. Then I put myself inside of it. The rooms are bright and airy, with big windows through which I watch the world. Outside, birds chirp and flowers bloom, and everything feels calm beneath the wide open sky. I close my eyes and paint more images, one stroke at a time, of sunflowers and sunsets and rooms full of books, so I don't have to be alone. I'm trying to listen to William's advice, to close my eyes and quiet the voices in my head. But when I begin to write down memories, attempt to lay them out in clear sentences, the words won't connect. When I look back for you, my mind goes blank. I can't describe it. This feeling I cannot name, this wound I cannot see. But I feel it, like every bone in my body is on fire. William says that writing can transform the unspeakable into a story. Only I don't want to tell a story. I want to break free. This is it.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate hearing that in your own voice. That's so special. And I was really struck as you were reading that by the line that writing can transform the unspeakable into a story. And the first question I was going to ask you, Etaf, was about your other novel, A Woman Is No Man, because you've mentioned previously that work arrived like an act of resistance. And so I wondered if you could tell us a bit about your journey to writing that debut novel.
Yes. Whenever I think about how that novel came to me, I can't help but think of divine intervention and God coming through me with that work. Growing up, I had dreams of writing. I used to read poetry and read a lot of novels, but I never actually pursued writing as a career. I studied literature, I taught at a community college, and it was during my time teaching. I'd been teaching for about 4 years at the time. I was teaching an American and British literature course. And I was just struck with a realization that had really plagued me my entire life, which was that our voices as Palestinians were not present in any canon, in any bookstore, in any bookshelf. And I had actively been searching for our stories as a Palestinian girl growing up in Brooklyn my whole life. And I didn't really have many voices and many books to read about what the Nakba was like for my grandparents, about what it felt like to grow up in America as a daughter of immigrants, what it was like for these immigrants coming to this country. I didn't really have access to those stories aside from the stories that my mother and my grandmother and my father and my grandfather told me. So it wasn't until I was in that classroom, a teacher myself, having having collected knowledge, I thought, wow, I'm educated. I'm educated. My mother was never educated. My grandmother was never educated. And here I am, I'm educated. And yet I still felt so uneducated in terms of my history. And I felt like I was still perpetuating this pattern of only highlighting certain voices. And at the time, very coincidentally, I was also extremely depressed and seeing a therapist. And the therapist had recommended that I start journaling about some things about my past that I didn't really want to talk about or face. And as I was journaling and as I was teaching, it was just the perfect opportunity for God to speak through the words and through me. And all of a sudden, I thought, wait a minute, maybe I can write the Palestinian or one of our Palestinian stories. I mean, God certainly gave me a privileged life to be born in this country. And so I think through that chain of thought, thinking maybe I can contribute to our stories being told and to our people being seen. And that was the start of A Woman Is No Man.
Thank you. Yeah, and you've so beautifully told, my reading anyway, told many stories in A Woman Is No Man through the perspective of the different characters that you share with us in that novel. You talked about your experience of reading, Etaf, and that you were a big reader. I imagine that you still are, as well as studying literature. And I noticed particularly in A Woman Is No Man that reading plays such a central role in several of the female characters' lives. It's described as different things. It's described as an act of rebellion, as something that can give comfort and hope, and something that helps your characters make sense of their lives. And I wondered, as we try and make sense of events unfolding today, particularly in the genocide and our understanding of what's happening to Palestinian people in Gaza, what do you think reading offers us now as people who want to make change in the world? And also, when does reading become no longer enough?
Yes, reading is definitely an act of resistance and rebellion against societal norms and against what our culture expects us to believe and to strive for. And just like our canons are specifically telling us white stories or white center stories and minimizing minority stories, minimizing the stories of people of color, uh, rewriting our history so that it's not accurate and that the culture then does not have an accurate understanding of what actually happened on our land and by our people. There's no other way to figure out what the truth is except through self-education and self-reading and speaking up. So it's not just, your first question says, was writing A Woman Is No Man an act of resistance? Absolutely. But it took me reading the works of Andre Lorde, of Maya Angelou, of Toni Morrison, of Jhumpa Lahiri, of Khaled Hosseini. It took me reading works that told a story that wasn't told in our mainstream culture. And I think that's something that we need to come together as a community and understand that what we think we know about the world has been told to us by people who benefit from that telling. And that we need to question everything, not just the very blatant and obvious war crimes and human rights violations and genocides and what is happening in Palestine. Absolutely. But we need to start there and then start going further. And reading is the only way for us to educate ourselves about things that are not told to us in school, that are not fed to us on the news. How else are we going to get this information? It's by reading books by artists and activists whose work, whose art depends on telling the truth. And that's something that I hope I can be in conversation with. And I hope that people, especially in light of what's happening in Palestine, can realize just how much it benefits their own sense of power and agency as an individual to stand up for the rights of others, because you're also standing up for your own rights in the process, your own rights as a human being. So yeah.
Thanks, Etaf. Yeah, and I wondered, I mean, I can see some of the comments in the chat box as well about people's experience of reading and what it's given them beyond their formal education. And I think a lot of us, as you've described, use reading as a way to continue to educate ourselves, to learn about narratives beyond the mainstream. And I've heard you talk about the limits that perhaps reading can have, and you've used this term performative empathy, and I wondered if you could speak a bit more to that and its relationship to reading.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. I forgot the second half of the question. Absolutely. So when I first wrote A Woman Is No Man, I was met with so much support um, from the white community. I'm gonna just call the white community out. I was just met with a lot of support from readers who thought that, my work was an act of bravery because it highlighted some of the women who were silenced in the Palestinian community. And those very same women expressed extreme discomfort with my standing for Palestinians and my standing for the genocide. like the same readers, like readers that I had been communicating with across years, were now so ashamed that how can I stand up for Palestinians? How can I stand up for the genocide? And I will say that that baffled me beyond words for a long time. I couldn't understand how reading, which was supposed to invoke empathy and was supposed to raise awareness across the globe, was now being used only selectively. And that those very same readers that were performing their empathy because it made them feel better about themselves. It made them feel better to read about books about marginalized authors. It made them feel better to want to come and be the savior, to save these women from their oppressors. And in that way, that to me didn't feel like empathy. That felt like another form of colonialism, another form of racism, another form of I'm superior to you because I come from a more peaceful place. I come from a place where I have rights. For you to not see that the oppression of Palestinian women is a direct result of the oppression of Palestinian men and Arab men and Muslim men by Israel and by the Western world. That is a direct correlation. And my work explicitly talks about that. So to me, I felt there was a lot of performative empathy going on. And the racism was very clear in that we will support minority and marginalized authors if we are still somehow superior to them, we are somehow benefiting from their oppressive story, and it somehow makes us look as Americans, as Westerners, it makes us look as the more civilized, non-barbaric, and peaceful nation, which is not true and something that I really wanted to talk about and bring awareness to people. If you are going to read our stories, and if you are going to claim empathy for our characters, you cannot just selectively claim when you feel empathy and when you're going to be silent on a genocide. That true empathy doesn't have limits. It doesn't have constraints. True empathy is able to see the link of cause and effect. True empathy is able to go back to the start line and truly put yourself in these characters' shoes and truly, truly believe, all right, I am not white today. I am brown. I am born in a country that is not mine. There are bombs outside the building. There's a gun to my head. That's how empathy starts. It's not political. Empathy is not a political act. And I wanted to express that. And I wanted people to understand that if they are reading the works of marginalized and minority groups of people, they can't leave their empathy at the door for political reasons.
Thank you. That's so powerful. And it really strikes a chord with us. And I know lots of people on this call who work in international NGO spaces where we've seen this outpouring of empathy, particularly since October 7th. But that has been, like you've described so beautifully, very conditional. It's been quite one way, and it hasn't taken on a spirit of solidarity or a real recognition of the humanity and the connection that we want to foster with Palestinian women. It's been, yeah, the solidarity has been limited and the empathy has been very conditional. It's really helpful for you to talk about that to us. Thank you. I wonder if I could go back to one of the themes of your novels, I think, but tell me if I'm wrong, on intergenerational trauma and the relationship between mothers and daughters, which as we in the team here were reading your novels, we understand that perhaps that can be seen as an allegory for Palestine. And so I wondered if you could tell us a bit about how you came to connect women's experiences of violence with the occupation of Palestine in your writing.
That is such a beautiful question and so well said. Thank you. You know, Palestine is our great mother. You know, she is the mother of my mother and my grandmother. And, you know, listening to the stories of my grandparents and my parents being stripped away from their mother country, and being displaced and scattered in cities that are not theirs, in refugee camps, and then here in America, in a country that is not theirs, being ripped away from their mother, and that longing to reconcile what went wrong. Could we have fought harder? How can I ever feel whole without you? It's sorry, it's emotional. One second.
Your time.
That theme was just, it screamed, it needed to be there. It wasn't something that I thought about, like, what do I write about? It was all I could write. There was nothing else to write. The minute I picked up the pen for A Woman Is No Man, it started very superficially as me wanting to tell the stories of these women. But there was no way to take Palestine out of the stories of these women, because these women were stripped away from their land and then doubly having to face the oppression of the occupation and the Israeli army, but then having to feel, even in their own home, they are no longer the mother of that home. They are struggling to survive. They are have no food. They have no water. They barely can predict whether their children will survive. As a mother, that is not a place of divine power and of divine peace. That is a place of war internally and externally. And that has there's there's nowhere to go from there but passing along that pain. That place of pain then trickles from the relationships that mothers have with their daughters, and it goes down the line into these generations. And I was so interested in that. I was so interested in exploring my mother's wounds and my grandmother's wounds and how they've manifested in my own life. Wounds that our ancestors have not had a chance to heal. The fact that we are still in the middle of this genocide, it's extraordinary how it's been 75 years. So my grandmother was about, I would say, 9 years old. Throughout the course of this woman's life, she has processed so much pain and has never been able to heal from it because it is an ongoing trauma. And I was very interested in how these ongoing unhealed traumas manifest themselves in the Palestinian community. I had read so much literature from Maya Angelou and Toni Morrison about traumas in the African American community, which helped me heal as a young woman, helped me heal from traumas that I couldn't really give language to in my own community because the women had not had the chance to process it. And I really believe that in order for us to break out of these cycles, the first step is awareness. The first step is naming the oppression. The first step is naming the trauma. And I really wanted my books to do that.
Thank you. You so beautifully there described and alluded to some the great works of some feminists that we admire hugely too. And you talked about healing and the kind of potential for healing. And I have a quote here from Toni Morrison, who says that in times of crisis, this is precisely the time when artists go to work. So she said, there is no time for despair, no place for self-pity, no need for silence, no room for fear. We speak, we write, we do language. That is how civilizations heal. And so I wondered, as you're kind of grappling with these ideas of what healing from trauma means for the Palestinian community, what the role of art in creating a gateway towards healing might be.
We need art more than ever. Art is to be consumed as a medicine, and it is being delivered as a sword. It is what helps us fight. It is what helps us express. It is what helps us process. If you think about the world that we live in, it is a mechanical world. The world has been designed for us to pay bills, go to work, make money, make sure rent is due, make sure that we are surviving. And it suffocates us. There's no room left in our day to process. to think, to heal. And whether you are consuming art, whether you are reading, whether you are painting, whether you are walking through a museum and studying the artifacts of civilizations and really processing what that means for you as a human being, whether you are sitting there and actively trying to rewrite history through your art, re-educate, these moments are the moments where we are outside the grind. We are outside the doing. We are being in these moments. We are expressing. And that's what makes art so powerful. People don't do art so they can get rich. They do art for change. They consume art for change. They want to be moved. They want to be educated. And so I agree with Toni Morrison. I think this is an especially difficult time to be alive as a human being, but especially as an artist, because you feel an immense responsibility to do good. I know that I personally have felt so guilty that what can I do more? What can I do more? What can I give back more? Is there more people I can reach? Should I be writing more explicitly? You feel really powerless, and the only way to do change is for art, is through art, consuming it, allowing it to open you, then having that conversation at dinner with your family. Because the news and even social media, as beautiful as it is for opening up our heart and as beautiful as it is for expression, it is limited. We are being silenced through it. I know personally, both of my accounts are severely silenced whenever I post Palestinian content or genocide related content. It's mind baffling how silenced we are. So what are some other avenues for us to, without being silenced, express ourselves? That is through literature and through art and through music. So I think it's really important.
Beautiful, thank you. I love the way that you've articulated that as also an opportunity to step outside the capitalist system, give ourselves different new opportunities to express and to see and to understand beyond the grind, I think was the word that you used. Okay, I think maybe I have one more question and then we're going to go to our beautiful participants for questions from you.
Yes.
And I think it links the work that you do with the work that we do. So we in our efforts towards feminist leadership, we often talk about the role of imagination and how powerful that can be as giving us an opportunity to dream of new realities and really feel the resistance that we have towards the systems we live in. And we see, or I've seen in your characters, them dreaming of bigger things, of greater freedom. And I wondered if you could speak to how imagination plays a role in your work or in your political messages that you're sharing, and how that supports all of us, imagination to act, even if that's in small ways.
That's such a beautiful question. Thank you so much, Natalie. Einstein says this best, actually. He says, imagination is more important than knowledge. And I didn't really understand what that meant growing up, reading that quote. Until the past few years, I've really understood this very clearly. And I hope if there's anything that my viewers can take away from this session, it's this. Our mind is very, very powerful. And anything that we imagine is essentially possible. If you can imagine it, it's possible. And that is really our strength as human beings. And in this fear-based world, in this problem-based world, in this war and violence and corrupt world that we live in, because it is a corrupt world, it can be so easy to focus on the fear that this world is bringing with us, the unsteadiness, the powerlessness, the shame, the guilt. It can be so easy. I am there too most days, feeling those negative feelings. I have to actively shift my perspective to imagine the world that I want to live in. Because if you can imagine the world that you want to live in, imagine the woman or the man you want to be, and then take actions towards that imagined state, it's done. It's a reality. It has to happen. That's just the law of the world that we live in. And I really strongly want to urge everyone here to strongly believe that peace is here for us on this earth. A beautiful, harmonious way of living that's based on community is available to us here on this earth. If enough of us can come together and see it as a possibility, imagine it, believe in it, have faith in it, and act towards it. It is 100% ours. It is 100% ours. And they know that. I will say, I'm going to say the society knows this. That is why everywhere you go, you are being distracted by junk. You are being distracted by trash. You're being distracted by news, by music that is just satanistic, and TV shows that are just ridiculous. Everywhere you go, you are being distracted from your divine essence, your true, immense, powerful being, which is one with God, which is one with nature, which is one with community, which is one with life and human rights and dignity for everyone, regardless of race, ethnicity, color, gender, regardless. That is our divine purpose on this earth, and it's our right, and we can have it. How do we have it? We unplug. We unplug. We have to unplug. If we are on social media, we choose what we water. We choose what we follow. We make sure it's uplifting. We make sure that we know our power, that the things that we are consuming are not taking away from our power and are not filling us with fear. And we create at home. As a mother, I'm creating a beautiful environment for my child. As a school teacher, as a doctor, as a plumber, the occupation doesn't matter. It's the way that you show up in this world, the kindness and the light that you bring into this world and the hope that you bring into this world. We cannot let them destroy our imagination and our hope and our will to have a better life, because it is ours if we believe in it. It is ours if we believe in it.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that. Yeah, powerful message of hope to all of us. I'm going to pause here because we really want to create space for everyone else to share some reflections or questions. I'm going to hand back to Kirthi to continue our conversation.
Thank you, Etaf, for that beautiful reading and for all of those answers. I think I can safely say I say this for everyone listening in. We could listen to you all day.
Thank you so much. This was an honor. I'm so honored to be here. Thank you.
Some tidy hours, enough. So we did have some questions coming in from the audience ahead, and we do have some coming live. So I'm just going to start us off with some questions that came ahead, and then we'll invite space for more folks to weave in their questions live. So I want to start by asking you, now that you've written 2 books with such a rich palette of characters, which character was the most challenging to write about and perhaps to create from scratch?
So of the 2 novels, I would probably say my most challenging was Yara, my character in Evil Eye. I want to preface that by saying that the characters in A Woman Is No Man were very difficult too. I just felt like they had a voice before I heard them. And when I heard them, their voice was clear. And they just were wanting me to capture their voice. Isra was very, very strong. Farida was very, very strong. I just could sit down and write about them for days and not run out of their voice. I felt with Yara, it was harder to find her voice. And it makes sense why it was harder to find her voice, because she is a displaced first-generation American who doesn't really belong anywhere. And so her stream of consciousness was very contradictory. She didn't feel Arab. She didn't feel American. She really was really independent, but yet she was full of so much shame. I think the mental background of Yara was much deeper and harder to access. I had to really get myself in tune with my own mental space in order to really make sense of her contradictions as a Palestinian immigrant and really make sense of the root of her shame and how I can bring her alive on the page in a very realistic, authentic way.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I can't imagine what that writing process must have been like. But it was beautiful to hear you share that.
Thank you.
So we do have one more question specific to A Woman Is No Man. And the person who asked it wants to know if anything in particular inspired you to write it.
Well, aside from wanting to tell one of our stories in literature, wanting to see our stories, particularly, the stories of my ancestors, my parents and my grandparents, and how they left Palestine and ended up here, and just the trauma that they brought home with them. I was mainly inspired by a scene in the novel In A Woman Is No Man, where Dea's sitting with Isra, and you could see that she could see the pain in her mother's eyes, and she is swallowing the pain, and she could feel that she's going to pass it along one day. I just was really struck with that scene, and I thought this really captures the theme of losing motherland, losing Palestine, and how that is just repeated across cycles. And that seed was, I think, the seed of the novel. That scene.
That's such a vivid scene. In fact, I remember reading that, and one of my best friends was also listening on this call. I think she might smile at this moment. We actually had such a profound exchange on chat that morning when we read it, because you actually took our breath away with your words. Really just want to bring that in to share with you how profound it was, and it remains a vivid memory from the book. Right, so we have a question live from one of our attendees, Nadia Ode, who asks, as a Palestinian,
I love you, Nadia.
Oh, you can see the question. Excellent, excellent.
No, I can't see the question. I was just waving at her because I recognize her name, and she's a good friend.
Wonderful, wonderful. It's beautiful to see community across all of these borders, isn't it?
Yes.
Right, so her question is, I have often, as a Palestinian, I have often felt misunderstood, and it has been so hard to deal with. How do you combat feelings of being misunderstood? And of course, she says, love you.
That question really sums up what it feels like to be a Palestinian, or even a woman of color, especially in the States right now. How you deal with it is really going inwards and just believing. I wish I can tell you, oh, this is how you should act, and this is how you should walk and talk in this country to be accepted, and to feel a sense of belonging, and to not feel judged. I wish I could say that. I don't think that that's quite important. Whoever judges you or labels you, it's not important. That is a reflection of the work they need to do. Any judgment that comes from them is a reflection of their ignorance and the work they need to do. What's more important, I think, is taking that flashword back inwards and helping you understand yourself and come to peace with yourself, and asking yourself, am I clear on my values? What is it that I am proud of being a Palestinian? Why do I need their approval? Why do I need them to understand me? And that's something that I've had to ask myself at various times in my life, where I craved validation. I wanted to belong. I wanted to be understood. I wanted to be normal. And I've come to the realization that if you are on a path of self-delusion, you are going to be normal, because our society is extremely self-deluded. And you have to take pride in the truth that you see in yourself. And you have to find a way to accept yourself, love yourself, and be proud of yourself, despite what people see of you, or despite the judgment that they place on you. Find a way to disconnect. I know this is all about community and all about oneness, but in order to get to a place of community and oneness, you need to have a community and oneness with yourself. And that first step is dissociating and detaching and letting go of whoever thinks what, when, and how. It doesn't matter. You are with yourself till you die. Accept yourself. Find out what the values are that you are proud of and love them. And the things that maybe you're not so proud of, that's where your resistance is. Okay, I see. I think I'm ashamed of this. It's time to heal it. It's time to drop it. This world outside of us, it's just meant to trap us into believing that we need it. We don't need it. We only need us. We need to go back in and fix our love with ourselves and our representation of ourselves by ourselves. And the rest of the world doesn't matter. And I love you, so you're perfect.
So beautiful. Multiple times in your share had goosebumps. Thank you. Thank you so much for naming that. And I also see so much agreement with what you've shared here on chat. We do have one more anonymous, it's more like a share, and I believe they'd like to have it heard. I wanted to share with Etaf that after reading A Woman is No Man, that my mom was inspired to take steps to protect her sister, my aunt, from violence she was experiencing from her family members in her home. Thank you for being vulnerable and writing such honest words.
Thank you. That means so much to me. So many women have reached out after reading A Woman is No Man with precisely messages like this, where they felt empowered to take a step and use their voice and change and take action to protect themselves or protect their family members. I think it's just beautiful what literature can do and how it's so much easier for us to see the truth in emotional journeys of fictional characters than it is sometimes to see them in our own lives, and how important it is for us to step outside our comfort zone and read things that we might not otherwise read, because in the hope that they will change us, because they will change us. So thank you for sharing that. Thank you.
It's beautiful. Thank you so much for all that you do. As you can see, your writing is changing lives in such significant ways. So in the spirit of talking about action a bit further, I just wanted to ask you another question that's come up previously or earlier for this session. What can feminist allies do better for the people of Gaza? And perhaps if you could share what women in Gaza want and need from us as feminists in solidarity.
Can you repeat the first question? I don't think I heard it.
Oh,
It broke up. Just the first one.
What can feminist allies do better for the people of Gaza?
I think we need to keep sharing their stories on their behalf for them. And social media is very important too. But here on the ground, in your day-to-day lives, I think I know for one, I was so used to sharing things on social media, and then in my real, like, when I would go to my day-to-day, I would be not afraid, but you feel like, all right, I've shared this, I've reposted this reel, I've shared this message, so I could just go about my day and go to work. Whether you're a feminist or not, there are multiple points in our day where there are opportunities to educate people that you see every day. I think there's more impact to try to have these conversations in your community, whether it's doing charity events, whether it's going to having dinner with people in your family and opening up these conversations on the dinner table to try to have that ripple effect. Speaking up really that's the only thing I can think of, like speaking up, because the forces right now are trying to silence us. And so we have to counteract that by using every platform that we have online and in person to help spread the message of what's happening to the people that are still asleep. And of course, donating as much as we can and using our platform for good.
It was really, really beautiful. Just wanted to remind attendees that there is a link on chat to donate and to support the cause. But for now, just going to take a pause from my side and hand it back to you.
Thanks, Kirthi. Thanks, Etaf, for so graciously answering so many questions today. we're just really honoured that you've been able to join us and that we can explore your work and some of the wider issues together, and help us and the community that have joined us today to continue to develop that understanding, that connection and feeling of solidarity. And so as we close today, as Keithy said, we'll share another reminder of the donation link of the cause that Etaf has chosen. We are continuing our work. We are feminist leaders in this series discussing feminist solidarity with Palestine and beyond. And so please keep in touch with us via our social networks and our newsletter if you'd like to be kept up to date with more webinars and events like this. A huge encouragement to you to read, buy, borrow Etaf's novels if you haven't done and you're new to her work. Yeah, I hope this has given you a taste if you're yet to read them. And then before we close today, we just wanted to invite you to take a moment to reflect on everything that we've heard. And we wanted to create this small moment by weaving in, if you'll allow us, Etaf, the voice of another artist who speaks
Of course.
Great, thank you. Yeah, we think this speaks to some of the themes that we've talked to today. So we're going to play a very short video, which is a video of the poem, A Poem by Marge Piercy, and Keithy's going to play it now. I'll stop.
What can they do to you? Whatever they want. They can set you up. They can bust you, they can break your fingers, they can burn your brain with electricity, blur you with drugs till you can't walk, can't remember. They can take your child, wall up your lover. They can do anything and you can't blame them from doing. How can you stop them? Alone, you can fight, you can refuse, you can take what revenge you can, but they roll over you. But two people fighting back to back can cut through a mob. A snake dancing file can break a cordon. An army can meet an army. Two people can keep each other sane, can give support, conviction, love, massage, hope, sex. Three people are a delegation, a committee, a wedge. With four, you can play bridge and start an organization. With six, you can rent a whole house, eat pie for dinner with no seconds, and hold a fundraising party. A dozen can make a demonstration, 100 fill a hall, 1,000 have solidarity and your own newsletter, 10,000 power and your own paper, 100,000 your own media, 10 million your own country. It goes on, one at a time. It starts when you care to act. It starts when you do it again after they said no. It starts when you say we, and you know what you mean. And each day you mean one more.
Wow. Wow. Oh my God. That just gave me the goosebumps. Can you please share that with everyone?
Yeah, we will. Keithy or Lara, if it's okay to add the link to that in the chat box. And it really, like as you talked earlier, Etaf, I was thinking of what you said. You said art is to be consumed as a medicine and be delivered as a sword. And I feel like your work and that poem that we've just heard does that so beautifully and movingly. So yeah, I hope that gave everyone here an opportunity just to take a moment to reflect. And our encouragement to you is to think about think about the hope, the strength, the courage that we can draw from these conversations as you leave the call today. Our final request from you, if it's okay to ask, is just a moment to give us some thoughts about how you found today's session or any of the other sessions you might have participated in this series. And I'm just gonna, for a moment, if I can find it here, share another short survey. one of my brilliant colleagues has done it for me. And this just really helps us hold ourselves accountable to you, our community, for creating spaces like this, and also helps us plan for what we might do in the future to continue to bring people together in a way that feels useful and hopeful for you. So please take a moment, if you wouldn't mind, just answering those few short questions. And we are going to pause there and close. And I'm just going to thank Etaf again for sharing your time, your wisdom and your creativity with us today. And to thank you all who've participated and shown up today. We so appreciate your time and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Any closing words from you, Etaf? The floor is yours, but no pressure.
Thank you. Thank you all for taking the time out of your day to come and listen. Just you choosing to be here is an act of resistance. Never forget your power. The video summed up so clearly just how powerful we are and how much we can do by our courage, by our hope, by our actions. So I hope that you all know that we can make a better world. It starts with us and we can do that. I love you all. Thank you so much for your time here today.
Thank you. And so with that, we'll say goodbye to you all. We'll see you soon, and we'll end for today. Thanks, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks, Etaf.